So the irony is so many of my clients are using alcohol as a way to relieve stress and anxiety, and yet alcohol is causing it. And the number one and the quickest win that my clients get when they quit drinking is how much their anxiety reduces. And yet that's the reason they were drinking in the first place, because alcohol is one of only 3 substances the human body can die from withdrawal. The other 2, one's illegal and one you can only get on prescription, and yet with alcohol, it was listed as an essential service during lockdown.
Welcome to Slay, the podcast where we dive into all aspects of female health, fitness and mindset. I'm your host, Louise Hazel. In today's episode, we're diving into an issue that many of us have encountered but may have never fully taken the time to understand: our relationship with alcohol. Our guest is an expert in grey area drinking and author of Beyond Booze. She specialises in helping people to navigate the fine line between casual drinking and unhealthy habits. In this episode, she'll be guiding us through the signs of grey area drinking, the impact of alcohol on both our physical and mental well-being, and how to know when it's time to take a break. Whether you're curious about your own habits or simply want to learn more about the role that alcohol plays in our lives, then this conversation is for you. So if you've ever wondered whether it's time to reassess your relationship with alcohol, stick around because we've got a lot to unpack today. Please welcome Sarah Rusbatch to the show. Sarah, thank you for joining us on the Slay podcast. How's your day going?
7 a.m. here for me, Louise. So it's a bright and breezy early morning in Australia, but so far so good.
You're so sprightly. You're up so early, so ready. Sarah, I've been watching all of your stuff on Instagram regarding alcohol, our relationships with alcohol. This is something we're going to get into real depth about today. For those of you who don't know at home, I actually grew up in a pub. I moved into one when I was 10 years old. But the question that I have for you and that I want to kick off with, I want to dive straight in. I want to dive in with the question, what is grey area drinking, Sarah?
So it's a great place to start. And I'm one of only, not too many accredited grey area drinking coaches. So if we put it into context, the conversation around alcohol used to be this: you are an alcoholic, in quotation marks, which is what we've always described someone who had a problem with alcohol. And usually when we consider an alcoholic, we think of someone who might be homeless, someone who's waking up in the morning with trembling hands, reaching for a drink and needs to drink alcohol to get through the day. They might be homeless, sitting on a park bench. You know, all of those stereotypes that have come from Hollywood, have come from TV shows, all of the stereotypical ideas we have of what an alcoholic looks like. But and if you weren't that, you were a social drinker. And you might be a big social drinker, but you were just a social drinker. So, but what we now do in the health world, in the medical world, is we use the term alcohol use disorder. And that goes from mild to moderate to severe. So severe alcohol use disorder would be someone who needs to have medical support to safely withdraw from alcohol. So someone who needs to go into a proper facility to have that real support from a medical perspective, because alcohol is one of only 3 substances the human body can die from withdrawal. The other 2, one's illegal and one you can only get on prescription, and yet with alcohol it was listed as an essential service during lockdown. So our relationship with alcohol as a society, and we'll come onto this later I'm sure, is quite skewed to us believing it's not problematic, we've got to have it, it's an essential service for goodness sake. Mild to moderate alcohol use disorder is where we would talk about grey area drinking. So if it's like a scale of 1 to 10, 1, someone who doesn't drink or has a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year. 10, someone who has that physical dependence on alcohol and drinks on a very, very consistent, regular, heavy basis and needs medical support to withdraw. Grey area drinking would be about a 4 to an 8 on that scale. So we've passed the point of being a take it or leave it drinker. We're not someone that is like, do I feel like a drink tonight? Can I be bothered having a drink tonight? Do I want to? Nah, don't want to drink tonight. Like that's an every now and then drinker. That's someone who's a 1 or a 2 on that scale. Grey area drinkers are often trapped in a little bit of a cycle of negotiation around their drinking. Oh, it's Wednesday. I don't drink on Wednesdays, but I really fancy a drink. Maybe I could have a drink and then I won't drink tomorrow. There'll be this constant negotiating and chatter that goes on around our drinking. We make rules, but we often break them. Another sign that you might be in that grey area, your first thought every time you have a moment of adversity. I'm stressed, the kids are driving me nuts, my husband's annoying me, I've had a terrible day at work, I need a drink. If we've developed that relationship with alcohol where it's something we feel we need, then we're probably falling into that grey area. I probably hovered around a 6 to a 7 with my drinking for many, many years. I didn't always drink every day. Sometimes I did, but not always. I didn't drink in the morning, which was my definition of what someone who had a problem with alcohol did.
Right.
But I definitely had a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol, and I struggled to make change. I could do a 30-day break, and then I'd go back to drinking, and it would be exactly the same as it was before. Nothing would have changed. And I think for any of your listeners, one way of deciding if I might be in that grey area is if I say to you now, right, starting tomorrow, we're going to take 30 days off booze. Let's just do it. Let's go together now and do 30 days off booze. Just be curious. How does that make you feel? Like,
Absolutely.
is your first thought, oh, I can't do that. I've got that wedding. I've got that birthday. I've got that holiday. I've got that, let's fill in the blank. If you've got a relationship with alcohol in some way, the thought of taking 30 days off and doing certain things without it it'll fill you with fear. Whereas people that don't have that relationship with alcohol, they'll just go, sure, yeah, I don't mind. I can do 30 days off. It doesn't bother me. And that's the difference. So hopefully that makes sense.
100% makes sense. You know, even just asking myself, I'm like, yeah, fine. In my mind, I don't even have a relationship with alcohol. I'm that person that, you know, dibbles, dabbles, tastes at a wedding, and everyone's like, whoa, steady on, Lou. But yeah, how interesting. And the interesting thing is I'm naturally drawing the comparisons to exercise, right? If I ask someone to, perhaps refrain from alcohol for this period of time, let's see how it affects the body. But yeah, I've heard these things being repeated time and time again with our clients over at the Slay Gym. Now, one of the questions I wanted to ask, I love that. I love the fact that we're talking about what signs can we be looking out for. That's so kind of just easy to understand. But is moderation a realistic goal for someone who falls into that category of grey area drinking? You said it was 4 to 6 or 4 to 8?
4 to an 8 is what
4 to an 8.
So moderation is a tricky one. What I find is when you've passed the point of being a take it or leave it drinker, so when you've started creating a neural pathway in the brain that says, when I feel this, I have a drink because it makes me feel that. So you've created, and I find with most of the people I work with, the majority of my clients are midlife women, they've created a neural pathway that's when I'm stressed, I have a drink and it makes that feeling initially go away. And when we've got that neural pathway, it doesn't go anywhere. Like that neural pathway has been created. So I support people to take breaks from alcohol. I believe that we can't ever attempt moderation unless if we're in the grey area, we take a sustained period of abstinence. I find, Louise, that probably for 98% of my clients, once they're in the grey area, moderation is not possible, and it's actually easier to have none than it is to have one.
I was going to ask, is abstinence the only way to regain control? Because I've seen this kind of play out. I kind of am now starting to identify as a coach, there are certain people, it's the same with different substances. Sometimes that person might be struggling with their relationship with alcohol. Sometimes it might be carbohydrates. So, the thing that you're saying with that neural patterning is really interesting, because if you think about it, if we all started drinking at the age of 18, think about how many times that's been reinforced. And you're kind of having to break the circuit and break the loop. How hard is it? And how many times do you find people kind of relapse? Let's say you've suggested to someone that they take a 30-day break. What's the average person's behavior when something's so ingrained? What do you expect in terms of like their relapse and are people always honest?
Yeah, so I think I create a very safe space in the programs I run so that people are honest if they end up picking up a drink for whatever reason, because it's very hard, because you've got a few things going on. Number one, you've got the neural pathways and the brain patterning. Number two, you've got the societal pressure, because alcohol's everywhere. It's expected. It's presumed that you're going to drink. It's the only drug you have to justify not taking. So you'll get that peer pressure as well. Plus, you've got the direct marketing of alcohol that's everywhere, the subliminal messaging that we're getting, particularly towards women. And I'll talk about this later, about when the alcohol industry made the conscious decision 30 years ago to start targeting women with their marketing. But women are constantly getting this messaging that I deserve it. It's the end of the day. It's my reward. I've had a hard day. And so we're constantly getting subliminal messaging, even if we're not aware of it, that alcohol is our reward and our treat and the thing that's going to help us at the end of the day. So there's a lot going on there. And I don't think I've worked with anyone who's gone the very first time, they've gone, I've realized I'm drinking too much. I'm going to change that. They've set out to change it, and then it's worked the very first time, and then they've never thought about alcohol again. It doesn't work like that. For most of the people I work with, their alcohol use is 20, 30, 40 years old, and we can't change those neural patterns in a 130-day challenge. So I find that the cycle tends to be maybe 4 to 7 attempts before it lands. But every single attempt, we learn something new. We don't go back to the start. And I say on average, it takes about 2 years from that first time of recognizing, I don't know if alcohol's serving me anymore, to actually successfully changing.
I see so many parallels with what we're experiencing in the gym when we're talking about people trying to, change so many aspects of their lifestyle, and alcohol just being one of them. Lots of people come into the gym with this expectation of transforming their whole physique overnight. And honestly, the people that can stick around long enough for 2 years and understand that it's a longer process are often the ones, funnily enough, that something clicks into place. And I sit there and I'm just waiting for the day. So that's really interesting that there's kind of those, we work in two very similar but parallel kind of services. But we're seeing the same kind of habits. And I guess it's probably because, we have to take so much time to break those cycles and habits. Now, one of the things, Sarah, is you were talking about that kind of emotional attachment to alcohol. The phrase that kept coming up for me was, but it just helps to take the edge off. How many times have you heard that?
So many times. And that was my story for a really long time. But what a lot of people don't realize is when we drink alcohol, we get a surge in our brain of a neurotransmitter like effect of GABA, which is a 20-minute hit of just calm relaxation. So that feeling when you have a drink. There's no denying that happens. That is a physiological response. My mentor calls it the warm honey feeling. It's like that feeling of just warm honey is just dripping through your body and everything starts to relax. And that might last 15 to 20 minutes. And that's because the alcohol causes this effect in the brain of this big surge of GABA. But because the brain is not designed to get such a big surge of GABA in one go, and because the brain wants homeostasis of all of the neurotransmitters to be at the right level, it gives a big surge of the opposing neurotransmitter to try and gain some balance, which is the stress type neurotransmitters, which includes cortisol. So after the 20-minute effect of the warm honey relaxation, we actually end up with increased levels of the stress hormone cortisol circulating around the body, which can then leave us feeling a little bit antsy once the warm honey feeling goes off. And then we're like, I want another drink now just to get rid of that kind of feeling. And so studies have been done that found even people that drink maybe 2 or 3 drinks 3 to 4 times a week have increased levels of circulating cortisol than people who don't drink at all. So the irony is so many of my clients are using alcohol as a way to relieve stress and anxiety, and yet alcohol is causing it. And the number one and the quickest win that my clients get when they quit drinking is how much their anxiety reduces. And yet that's the reason they were drinking in the first place. So we get stuck in this vicious cycle of we're feeling anxious and stressed, so we drink, but the drink is making us more anxious and stressed. And so then we have another drink to get rid of the feelings that were caused by the drink in the first place.
We were literally absolutely insane, isn't it? What could we be doing to potentially break that loop? So, we're talking about that feeling of being coated in honey. What are the alternatives to alcohol that also make you feel like you're being coated in honey without somebody dripping warm honey all over your body?
And I think that this is the thing, and you will be so familiar with the understanding of we as a generation are looking for comfort as quickly and easily as we can. And sometimes we have to accept that some of the other things that we replace when we take the alcohol away may not give such a instant impact of the warm honey feeling, but with regular consistent practice we actually end up just reducing those stress levels anyway. So it's working out what works for you, but we know that meditation causes an increase in GABA. When people, I think there's a study that was done by the University of Oxford that showed one 60-minute meditation increases GABA by 27%.
Wow.
Because I do neurotransmitter assessments on my clients when I work with them one-to-one, and 80% of the women I work with are deficient in GABA, because the irony is consistent alcohol use causes a deficiency in GABA. And so we need to find ways to raise the GABA, because then we're going to be feeling less stressed and anxious. So meditation, yin yoga, there are supplements that really can support GABA production.
Talk to me about those supplements. This is one of the questions from one of the girls in the gym today. She was like, what can we be taking food-wise or supplement-wise when we're perhaps withdrawing from alcohol that can help us feel better?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So one of the supplements, the two that I absolutely love for helping us feel more calm and relaxed, are ashwagandha and L-theanine. So I would always speak to a naturopath. Just remember, never, because you don't want to be taking both of those together. You're probably better off talking to a naturopath about which one is better for you. The foods that really help GABA production are broccoli, almonds, bananas, oats, halibut.
Lovely. All of the things I love.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very healthy diet.
Right. The other thing we need to be making sure that we're doing is really prioritizing our gut health, because alcohol destroys our gut health. It's the number one cause of leaky gut. Also, because most alcoholic drinks are quite high in sugar, they lead to us feeding the parasites in the gut, which leads to, less of the good gut bacteria. So it's really important that we get some fermented food every day. There's a brilliant podcast on the Huberman podcast about alcohol, and he says, if there's one thing I would say to everybody who drinks alcohol, it is make sure you are having fermented food every single day, because every alcoholic drink is destroying your gut health. And it's in our gut that we produce serotonin. 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. Serotonin is what helps us have an increased sense of well-being. So if we're deficient in serotonin, we're feeling low in mood, then we're more likely to reach for a drink because we're feeling a bit crap. And so it's all a vicious cycle. So working on that neurotransmitter replenishment is really important.
Wowzers, love that. I love these really practical, everyday things that you can kind of be doing, not in replacement, but in support of potentially just changing these lifestyle habits for those people who want to take a little break or step away. What about our emotional well-being? We talked about anxiety here, but are there any mental health warning signals that indicate that we perhaps need to cut back?
Yeah, look, I think I had the feeling for me towards the end, and I quit drinking in April 2019, and I was on a 2-year roller coaster of taking breaks, then quitting before I finally stopped. And the overall feeling I had was, is this it? Is this my life? I felt like I exercised, I looked after my kids, I ran my business, and I drank. And I didn't feel like I had much more that really brought me a huge amount of joy, fulfillment, purpose in my life. Because we know that even if we don't feel hungover, we feel tired, because alcohol disrupts our REM sleep. So you can't actually get a full, decent, supportive, restorative night of sleep, even if you've had one drink, because of the impact alcohol has on REM sleep. So even if you wake up in the morning and you're not hungover, you're probably going to be feeling a bit tired. So the story of my life was, I'm not hungover, I'm just tired. And I think I probably said that 4 times a week. And what we have found is that so who wakes up in the morning having not had a great sleep, maybe tossed and turned a bit, maybe had the awful dreaded 3 a.m. wake up, and goes, oh yeah, I'm ready for a smashing day today. I'm going to smash my goals at the gym. I'm going to smash my day at work. I'm feeling fantastic. We just don't. We probably feel 5, at the best 6 out of 10. And
if you're lucky.
If you're lucky. Whereas sometimes you might be a 3 out of 10. Throw in perimenopause into that. Throw in being a mum of teenage kids, running a business, running a home, doing all the things. You just feel like you're existing. And that was how I felt. Like one client who I have been working with, she said to me after I think she hit the 3-month sober mark, and she said to me, Sarah, it's like I've gone from living in black and white to living in colour. It is like everything starts to change because you have mental clarity. You have your confidence grows because you're not feeling anxious. You have energy, you have motivation. You're feeling proud of yourself because you're like, look at me go. I did another night alcohol free. And then because of all these new positive emotions, you start dreaming bigger. You start wanting more for yourself. You start creating new opportunities in your life. And then slowly but surely, everything starts to change.
Yeah. One of the things I see a lot of this in the gym, because obviously one of the catalysts is often exercise. So people know that they have an appointment so that they don't drink. And so you see this kind of like snowball effect happen in people's lives that triggers a deep rooted amount of change. And you can actually just do more. You're just way more functional. And I think that we really underestimate the amount that alcohol can really impact in a negative way. Like you said, kind of inflammatory thoughts, inflammatory feelings, negative feelings on a daily basis that we're not even aware of. I think that, having grown up in a pub, I've seen our best friends, our regulars, who we typically see 5 days a week, just that I've seen the whole spectrum. So I've seen people who, go on long term to drink alcohol and get very, very ill. I've seen people that pass away very young. Both of my parents passed away, before the age of 63. My father, age 50, and my mother, age 62. Lots of their friends, dying in their mid-60s or even earlier. And I can honestly say, like, alcohol is definitely one of the factors, probably the biggest contributor. You've seen so many kind of alcoholics really just really, like you say, existing, barely even, not thriving is very different. And I think that one of the things I've seen the most in the gym, when people take up exercise, reduce their alcohol consumption, they go from surviving to thriving in a very kind of relatively short amount of time. When you consider the amount of years it has potentially taken to gain those habits in the first place. Now, here's a question, Sarah. Do you drink now?
No.
Not at all? No. Not a drop?
No.
100% sober? Why not?
There is nothing alcohol would bring to my life. Absolutely nothing. And, going back to what you were saying just then, I can see alcohol kept my life small. It kept my mindset small. It kept my self-belief small. And it's so much more than just not drinking.
Wow.
And even I was not what you would describe as an alcoholic. I did not have severe alcohol use disorder. I was a mum that got probably carried away with mummy wine culture a little bit, drank a bit more than she should have. And even for me, taking alcohol out of my life has been absolutely life-changing. I don't work with women who are at the severe end. I work with women who are at that mild to moderate level, and they get the biggest changes, because what most people don't realize is how much alcohol is holding them back, because they don't consider themselves that bad that they need to change. So they don't change because they're like, well, I don't meet that stereotype of having a massive problem. And so for me, I don't need to make any changes. But that's why I always say to everyone, take a break from booze, give yourself a decent amount of time, and then just notice what's different. Notice if your sleep is different. Notice if your energy is different. Notice what your self-talk is like. Notice if you're feeling calmer with your kids and you're being a more present parent. Like, just notice all of those things, because then you've got data. Whereas if you never take a long enough break, you're never actually going to know the version of you that doesn't drink.
Nothing to compare it to.
You've got nothing to compare it to. And what a travesty it would be to get to the end of your life and never actually know who you could have been without the alcohol that could have been impacting you.
Yeah, this is literally the mantra of every Olympian. Like, I think the mantra of and the mindset of every Olympian is, I cannot retire until I've left it all on the track. Which is why, for an Olympian, a person who lives in a very extremely, somewhat healthy, somewhat unhealthy, it's the same type of thing. It's a spectrum. It's a 10, a lifestyle. We have to know that we've done our very best. I absolutely love that. Now, what about this question, Sarah? When you were giving up alcohol, How did everybody around you react to your decision to stop drinking? What were the reactions of your friends, family, supportive or otherwise?
Yeah, so I've just had a book come out, Beyond Booze, and I've written 2 chapters, one dedicated to navigating your social life and sharing my story of my friendships, and
Mm,
one dedicated to navigating your romantic relationship and what you do if your
mm,
partner still drinks, how to navigate sober sex, like all of these things that you might not have actually really considered before that are really big first time things for many people. So I'll share a wee snapshot of each. So with my partner, it was bloody hard because we
yeah.
met at the age of 24 and we were both big drinkers. We were
Mm,
the party house. We were the house that everyone came back to after the club. We were the house once we were in Perth and we had children where everyone came to on the Saturday afternoon for the barbecues. That was always the barbecue where you left your car and got an Uber home because you'd had a few too many drinks. So that
mhm,
was our whole identity. And that was
mm,
how he and I connected. So
mm,
when I stopped drinking, and I stopped before him, he went on to go and stop as well. It was like I was like, oh, well, how do we even connect with each other now? How do we talk to each
mm,
other? Because what we used to do was he'd come home from work, I'd grab a wine, he'd grab a beer, we'd go and sit in the garden. Sometimes we'd have a cheeky fag behind the washing line, and that would be our little moment of connecting as oh, how
mm,
was your day? And then when I
mm.
stopped drinking, we didn't do that anymore. And then before you knew it, after a period of time, we were just like ships in the night, and the only communication was, right, you take Will to rugby, I'll take Scarlett to netball, have you fed the dog, the cat needs to get her injections, oh, we've got no toilet paper. And it
Sexy.
just became yeah, right, you can imagine it was going off in the bedroom like not. And so we ended up in couples therapy because we kind of lost this communication, and the couples therapist said to us, you've lost your ritual of connection, because it used to be
Mm,
that you'd have that evening drink together. So we need to
mhm,
create a new ritual of connection. So we did. So every
mm.
night after dinner, we walked the dog, which doesn't sound that
It's so
amazing,
lovely. Look at my face. I was just
but
like, oh.
but it's amazing what you can talk about when you're not sat staring at each other and you're walking. Like the streets of my neighborhood have got all our secrets, because
Mm,
slowly but surely, when you're walking, particularly for men, I think it's a lot easier to talk when you're just like facing forward and not looking at each other. We just started to just create connection. And some nights all we would do was point at people's flowers and go, oh, aren't they nice? And other
yeah.
nights it was deep and meaningful. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. How are you feeling about this? How is it for you that I'm not drinking? And so slowly but surely we got that connection back on track. But it took a lot of work, and we ended up in couples therapy to get the support to help us.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, like it was great. And then on the friendship side, look, I always say
Yes.
that there will be some friendships that are probably based on you getting drunk together, and
Yeah.
maybe they will not go the distance if you
Mm,
decide to change your relationship with alcohol, because maybe they were just a friend for that period of time in your life, and it's not that you've had a big fallout, but it's just that they're not your person as you're going on a bit of a journey of self-growth and self-development. Because I don't think anyone removes alcohol and doesn't go on a bit of a journey of
mm,
self-awareness, because you can't help but do that. Whereas there are other friendships that will go deeper because you're discovering your more authentic self, and then
mm.
you're inviting them to get to know you on a deeper level.
Did you lose many friends?
Not many. And there's still like beautiful friends that I will stop and have a chat to and say hello to, who I used to see all the time, but I don't see as much now because it was based on going and drinking champagne in the garden and not remembering how you got home. But I've also got a lot of new friends who've come into my life as a result of me making the decision to remove alcohol.
Was anyone particularly resentful of your lifestyle choices?
Yeah, I
And how
did
did
have
that pan out?
I, the best line I think I ever had was at the school gate, school pickup, mum saying to me, let's catch up when you're drinking again.
Oh,
And I was
bless
like,
them.
well, we could still catch up without me needing to drink. I don't like, you don't need to drink alcohol with me for us to be able to see each other.
That's kind of super layered. Was she saying like, let's catch up when you're drinking again so I can have a good time? Or was she saying, let's catch up when you're drinking again because you were a good time? You know what I mean?
Probably a bit
Like,
of both.
which one?
Probably a bit of both. Um,
Wild.
but it's
What did
definitely
you, what did you
what
say?
most I said, I think I was in so much shock, Louise. I just kind of stood there and went, yeah, and then went home and was just like really sad because I was like, you can still see me without alcohol. Like, we don't have to drink. But it just takes time because I was Sarah the party girl. So
right.
it also, people had to get used to and adapt to me changing as well. So it was a process.
I feel that. So what are the practical steps and advice that you have someone who's looking to eliminate alcohol? Let's say they're listening to this and they're like, oh, there's a few things that are kind of resonating and hitting home. What's their next step? Because the whole thing, perhaps even giving up altogether, can seem quite overwhelming, no?
Yeah, like you don't need to start thinking like that immediately. I think the first step is evaluate how alcohol's making you feel. So, as the person you are today, at the age you are today, how is it making you feel? Not how it made you feel when you were 25. How's it making you feel right now? Is it impacting your sleep? Are you noticing increased anxiety? Are you noticing you're putting weight on? Often for women, it's around the tummy and really struggling to lose it. Are you noticing your skin is getting a bit dry and dull and doesn't have the appearance that it wanted? That you're after? Are you noticing that your self-talk is perhaps a bit more negative, that you're more low in mood? It's just start with noticing. And if you think or have any kind of hunch or belief that maybe I'm ready to take a break from alcohol and just see how it makes me feel, then I would say there's some incredible programs out there. I run women's 30-day programs just as an initial starting point to take 30 days off booze with education, support, resources, because what we don't want to do is do it the way I used to do it, which was take 30 days off, sit at home, pissed off, grumpy, crossing off the days until the 30 days are gone, and then go out and get as drunk as you possibly can on day 31. That is not the way to do it.
Is that not how everybody approaches dry January? We did
Totally.
actually a podcast called Why Dry January Ruins February. And because it's this idea of you've really not learned anything. You haven't learned anything about moderation. You're, like you say, you're just sat at home waiting for that next moment. So yeah, how interesting.
So I think take the 30 days, and then I would say as well, really evaluate, use the data that you get during that 30 days to evaluate. So ask yourself those questions. How's my sleep? How's my energy? Do I notice I've got a sense of having more time? Has my anxiety reduced? Have I lost any weight? Am I noticing better results in the gym? Am I noticing I'm more productive at work? Do I have a more happier sense of well-being? Because these are all the benefits that I see people get in 30 days. Have I saved money? Have I, just really use some data points so that at the end of the 30 days, you can go, okay, so how do I feel now? Which version of my life and which version of me do I like better? Because if you don't use the data, you can't ever make that decision.
Do you sometimes see people using that data and still choosing to go backwards?
What I see is they don't choose to go back to drinking how they were, but they believe that they've taken 30 days off. They now feel in control of their drinking, and they go back to alcohol thinking, now I'll be able to moderate, and now I'll be someone that just has a glass here and there and doesn't have that relationship where they're drinking 3 or 4 times a week and feeling more like dependent on it for stress and stuff. But what tends to happen is within a month, they'll be back to drinking at the level that they were before. And so that's what I see. But sometimes that's part of the process.
Yes.
Because you have to go through that to prove to yourself, actually, moderation doesn't work for me. And you can only know that if you keep trying and it doesn't work.
100%. And it's like, I feel like sometimes people will take that very, very personally and feel like a failure, and then they won't try again. And the key is, like you said, every single time you try, you're getting new information, not starting at the same point. And, progress, bit like in the gym, lifting weights it's not linear. There's no kind of like ability or route that literally says you go from A to B to C to D. No, you go A, B, C, B, A, B, C, D. Do you know what I mean? And it might be like more like that, much more
Totally.
stop, start, 1 foot forward, 2 feet back. And so mentally, I think that what would you what would you say the message is for those people who are at that place where they're like, oh God, I've failed again? Like, what's the mental approach that they need to take?
The mental approach is use it as information, not as judgment. So it's be curious and don't be judgmental. Isn't that interesting? I've just tried another month of moderation and it didn't work for me. There's a message here, and maybe the message is moderation actually isn't going to work for me because I'm someone that's got quite an all or nothing approach to things. And the other thing to note is that people respond to alcohol differently. Some people get a massive dopamine hit from alcohol, and for others, the dopamine hit is really small. And so I get a huge dopamine hit from alcohol. Like Huberman says in his podcast, you can put a group of 21-year-olds in a room together drinking, and you can probably tell which are the ones that are going to go on to develop alcohol use disorder, because they're the ones that will get lit up and animated the more they drink. That was totally me. Whereas my friend Christine, she has a drink, and after a couple of drinks, she started to get tired and wants to go home for a cup of tea. That was never me. I was the one that was getting lit up and revved up, and I was like, what do you mean the party's finished? I'm just getting started. And that's the difference as well, is understanding our brain responds differently to alcohol. And for some people, moderation is never going to be an option. So use the fact that you're quite a dopamine driven person to turn it into a positive. Use it for your exercise, use it for smashing career goals, use it for creating an amazing life. Don't use it to keep staying trapped in the alcohol cycle.
Love that. Two things I want to touch upon. Let's go straight back into response there, because one of the questions we were talking about in the gym today was, one of the questions I had actually for you was, why is it that some people react very negatively to alcohol from the perspective of sometimes people get very nasty, say spiteful and hurtful things. So I feel like we've probably all got that one person in our lives or a friend of a friend that we've seen that gets kind of dark with alcohol, and they end up saying things either to friends, family members, spouses that they regret. So where you're saying like you turn into the party, the party animal. Other people like me, I'm off to bed, I'm in my slippers after a glass of red wine, I'm done. I'll see you next New Year's Eve. And then you've got the other side to that, and the people who, you end up like, I don't know whether I want to be around this person. Then they show up the next day and everything's hunky-dory.
So what I would say there, my perception of this, I'm not a psychologist, but my response from my opinion is they're people with a lot of unresolved stuff. And when they drink alcohol, because the prefrontal cortex shuts down, which is the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, they will have no filter, and they will start saying the things because they don't have that rational executive functioning part of their brain online, because it goes to sleep the minute you start drinking. So if you've got someone who's got something in them where they're pissed off about something that their mum said 14 years ago that they still haven't got over, they might be feeling resentment and anger towards their mum that they just shoved down. But as soon as they've had a drink, while they might not bring up that specific thing that was said 14 years ago, the resentment and anger that they feel towards that person will start to come out as their executive functioning starts to go offline. And so to me, that's just a sign of someone that probably would be great to get some therapy and to understand what are some of the traumas and the healing that might need to happen to allow them to find more peace within.
Love that. Now I want to talk about women and men specifically women. How does alcohol affect women differently to the way it affects men? Are there any differences?
Yeah, so there's three main reasons. Number one, men generally have a higher level of water in their body than a woman does. A woman will generally have a higher proportion of body fat because women are built physiologically as well to carry babies, and they have estrogen and all of those hormones. So what this means is more alcohol gets diluted by the man than it does for the woman. So that makes a big difference to how intoxicated you will become. Second thing, there's an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, ALDH, which is the enzyme that we as a human being produce to eliminate and remove alcohol from the body as effectively as possible, because alcohol is a poison to the human body. We've got to remember, although we dress it up in pretty pink bottles with butterflies and rainbows, it's petrol. That's where we've got to remember it's ethanol, and it is a poison to the human body, and it's in the same carcinogenic category as asbestos and tobacco. And so because the human body does not like alcohol, we have an enzyme called ALDH that removes it from the body as quickly as possible. Certain people have less of this enzyme. So I know a couple of people who actually don't produce this enzyme at all, which is why alcohol makes them so sick. Genetically, we know that people of Asian descent tend to have less of this enzyme. So we'll always find that they will not be able to process alcohol as effectively. They might be more prone to vomiting when they drink, to facial flushing, and some of those other symptoms. Women have less of this enzyme than men. So what this means for a woman is more alcohol content enters her bloodstream than if a man and a woman were standing side by side drinking the same amount. More of the alcohol goes into a woman's body. This makes a woman more prone and more vulnerable to all the health risks of alcohol. So while alcohol-related stroke can happen to both a man and a woman, it happens 4 times quicker to a woman. Alcohol-related heart disease happens quicker to a woman. Addiction to alcohol happens quicker for a woman. But what's even more alarming is that as a woman ages, her levels of ALDH drop even further. So a woman in her 40s and 50s cannot metabolize alcohol as effectively as she did in her 20s. So again, and this is where we start to see why there is no denying that alcohol is a direct causant of breast cancer. And the World Health Organization has come out and said that there are many countries where they're identifying that alcohol is the number 1 cause of breast cancer because of the circulating estrogen that occurs as a result of drinking alcohol. And then the third thing that you probably have never heard, and I have never heard, is depending for a woman on your time of the month, when your estrogen is higher, which I think is around day 12 in your cycle, you're going to get more drunk than, say, on day 24. So you could drink the same amount one night and it barely touches the sides and you feel absolutely fine and don't feel rough the next day. And 2 weeks later, you could drink the same amount. You could feel a bit slurry. You might not remember so much and you might feel dreadful the next day. And that is all to do with where your hormones are at that time of the month. And I think it's really important we know that, but it's really important our daughters know that. Because from a safety perspective as well, for a girl who's drinking, there are going to be certain nights where you might black out from drinking the same amount of alcohol that you could drink 2 weeks later and not even feel that bad on. And so it's really important that we understand from a woman's body perspective, we cannot metabolize alcohol as effectively as a man.
So would you say that rather than marketing alcohol to women, we should be protecting women from alcohol?
Oh, for sure. So the Lancet, which is the world's biggest medical journal, came out only this year and has recommended that the governments start introducing labeling of the health risks of alcohol because of the direct cause to breast cancer.
Right. So in the same way that tobacco companies had to come out and were made to market and advertise the risks of lung cancer, do you see the alcohol and beverage companies adopting those rules or suggestions, or do you think we're a long way off?
We're a long way off. And that will only happen if government makes it policy. So Ireland is the first country that is actually, and you know how much the Irish drink, right?
I was going to say, don't tell me they're leading the charge.
They are leading the way. So Canada in 2023 was the first country to come out and say there is no safe amount of alcohol because of the health risks. And we recommend no more than 2 units a week. And Ireland is leading the way. It's in 2026, I believe, that it will be mandatory that all alcoholic drinks have to have labels that alcohol can lead to 7 types of cancer.
Go on, Ireland. We love that. I've got a couple of questions here, and then we're going to play a game to finish. These are questions from our listeners and social media fans. One person asked, fermented versus distilled, which one is best? And specifically for fat loss.
Are they talking about alcohol?
Yeah.
Yeah, so neither. Because alcohol still gets broken down in exactly the same way into the human body and has exactly the same effect. Doesn't matter in which form we drink it.
Someone says, does alcohol affect your mood and how long do the effects last?
Absolutely. We know that it's linked to depression and anxiety. We know it takes 72 hours for alcohol to leave the human body. We know that it takes up to 2 years for your neurotransmitters to rebalance and to recalibrate after constant alcohol use. That's the impact that alcohol has on your brain and your mood.
Wow, 2 years. And I'm that person that will drink on the weekend and still feel it till Wednesday. And when I mean drink, I mean like half a glass of wine, if that. Casey says, if I had to drink, what is the drink that is the least bad for you? In brackets, does that even exist?
It doesn't exist. Alcohol is still alcohol. It's still a toxin and a carcinogen, and it doesn't matter in what form we drink it.
Somebody else says wine or tequila.
Alcohol-free. You can get alcohol-free wine and you can get alcohol-free margaritas.
Love that. Someone asked, actually, I think this is a question to me. Did you ever drink alcohol to celebrate a championship or during your career? The answer is yes. That would often be the only time a year that I would drink and I would get shit-faced. Shit-faced because I had very little consumption throughout the period of the year. And also, as we know, like it's often used as a celebration. It was the one time as athletes we were allowed to be naughty, let off some steam, all of those things. It would take me weeks and weeks and weeks to recover, but often it would be at the end of the year. But yeah, I would certainly overdo it. Sarah, we're going to finish up with a little game now. We're basically I've got 10 social, let's say, events. And the game is called Slay or Sober. So slay means you're going to get absolutely sloshed. Let's call the game Sloshed or Sober.
Okay.
So which one is better done with alcohol or without? I think I know your answer to these 10. Here we go. We'll do it anyway. Social gatherings, sloshed or sober?
Depends who you're with. I'd say sober if you're with people that you love being with. I'd say sloshed if you're with loads of people that you can't bear their company and you need to drink just to get through it.
Excellent. Celebrations.
Sober. Be present for it.
Love that. Cooking.
Sober.
I'd sometimes put the wine in the food. Make a good spag bowl,
Yeah.
Live music.
Sober.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
I went
Dance.
to my first sober rave and sober dance. Oh my God, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's really interesting. The next one is dancing.
Sober. Love it. But it took a while.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything worse than being really, really drunk and not being able to dance to the beat. And then I always used to think it's no, everyone else is drunk too. Darts.
Never. Probably sloshed.
Yeah. Beach days. You might hit the target. Beach days.
Oh, sober. Who wants a hangover in the sun?
No, I don't think I do. Watching sports. This is an interesting one.
Sober.
The interesting thing about that is we just had the Olympics and obviously, I didn't drink a drop, but I couldn't imagine sitting on my sofa and having a beer and watching the Olympics. There's just no way. Fine dining.
Sober. Enjoy the food.
See, I'm going to disagree with you. I wouldn't say slosh, but just a little tipple. Perhaps a little wine pairing, just something, just a little taste.
There's actually places now, Louise, that do wine pairing with alcohol-free wines.
I was going to ask you this. Karaoke, last one.
Sloshed. I can only do that absolutely leathered. I've never done it since I've been sober.
Agreed. That way, at least you've got an excuse for the sounds that come out. Talk to me about alcohol-free beverages that you love, because you must have been able to, switch over. Are there any brands that we need to know of?
Yeah, so if you have a look on my website, there's a whole page under the resources section with all my recommendations, because some of the alcohol-free drinks are blooming awful and some of them are absolutely amazing. You have to be careful of the sugar content, because some of them have got such high sugar that they leave you feeling like you've got a hangover the next day. My number one top brand for people that like a dry champagne is Naughty, Noughty, by a brand called Thompson and Scott. It is bloody brilliant. They do a rosé and they do a Chardonnay, quite dry, really, really lovely. There's so many alcohol-free beers now on the market. Some of them are low carb as well, so that's great. I love an alcohol-free gin with a tonic or some like lime and soda.
I haven't heard of alcohol-free gin.
Oh my goodness, it's everywhere. Although I will say, Louise, that a lot of my clients in America say that they struggle to get the alcohol-free drinks. They are not as prominent in the US as they are over here in Australia or the UK. Like, we've got so many. You would go to a restaurant now and see a whole page of alcohol-free drinks that they're serving.
Wow. So maybe like everyone, if you're not able to get those options, maybe just stick to the mocktails page, lime and soda. I feel like a lime and soda always makes it look like you're having something significant. You're under that societal pressure that we sometimes do come under. Sarah, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for joining us today. Like, huge thanks. This was a topic that I was so excited to dive into, obviously having grown up in a pub. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with? Anything we haven't covered?
Look, I just think, just to reiterate what we've said, be curious. Just be curious. Even if you don't think that you're drinking enough that it's massively impacting you, you'll be surprised. If you just take a break and just see how it goes. Get a copy of my book, Beyond Booze. Join one of my alcohol-free programs, because you don't want to get to the end of your life and not know that actually your full potential was in reach, but it just, you didn't grasp it because you were tired. You were feeling a bit 5 out of 10 most of the time. And like, I truly believe that we get this one time on planet Earth, and use it and reach your potential and reach for the stars.
I love that, Sarah. Tell us where we can find you. What's your website?
So it's just my name, Sarah Rusbatch, which is RUSBATCH.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely appreciate you, Sarah. You definitely slay. And we look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks so much, Louise.
Thank you. That concludes this episode of Slay. Stay tuned for more empowering discussions on female health, fitness, and mindset. You can follow me at Louise Hazel on social media, and you can follow Sarah at Sarah Rusbatch now. You can check out the Slay brand at Slay Athletic, and don't forget to subscribe to the Slay podcast if you haven't done so already on YouTube, and leave us a comment. You can also get fit at home using the Slay app. You can download that now for free from the App Store to join our online community.